Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Gravelazi, and coming up in today's newscast. Israel fires back as Australia officially reverses its recognition of West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Will Israel supply weapons or missile defense systems to Ukraine? Russia warns if it does, it risks relations between Moscow and Jerusalem. And the Jewish holiday season is over, but not before Jews around the world celebrate. Australia has officially reversed its recognition of West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and said the issue should only be resolved as part of future peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. The details in the following report. Israel strongly criticized Australia on Tuesday after it officially reversed its recognition of Western Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Prime Minister Yair Lapid called the decision a hasty response to an incorrect report in the media, adding that, quote, "We can only hope that the Australian government manages other matters more seriously and professionally," end quote. Lapid reiterated that Jerusalem is the eternal and united capital of Israel, and nothing will ever change that. Israel has also summoned Australia's ambassador over the decision. On Tuesday, Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong officially reversed the previous government's recognition of West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and said the issue should only be resolved as part of future peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians.
Today, the government has reaffirmed Australia's previous and long-standing position that Jerusalem is a final status issue. And a final status issue that should be resolved as part of any peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian peoples. This reverses the Morrison government's recognition of West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Australia's embassy, of course, has always been and remains in Tel Aviv. The Australian government remains committed to a two-state solution in which Israel and a future Palestinian state can coexist in peace and security within internationally recognised borders. We will not support an approach that undermines this prospect.
In 2018, the Conservative coalition government led by then Prime Minister Scott Morrison formally recognized West Jerusalem as Israel's capital, though did not move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The UK's The Guardian initially reported on Monday that the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade quietly deleted 2 sentences from its website pertaining to the status of Jerusalem. Following the report, the Australian government initially denied reversing course before flip-flopping and announcing its new decision. And joining us now with more on Australia's decision is attorney and CEO of the International Legal Forum, Arsen Ostrovsky. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So first of all, what brought this decision on? Why the reversal? Why now?
It's a good question. I think what we've seen is a steady rollback of many of the previous government's policies, which is standard procedure when new governments or administrations take place. And the previous government, led by Scott Morrison, really did set the gold standard in terms of support for Israel, whether that was standing up for Israel at the United Nations, combating anti-Semitism, showing solidarity during terror attacks. So what we're seeing, and I think we'll continue to see, is a gradual rollback in some of these pro-Israel policies. But I think what's really sort of disconcerting here especially is the manner in which this was done. I think, as you mentioned in your introduction, that at first there was a denial that there was any change in policy, and then, as we saw barely 24 hours later, a complete reversal and confirmation that there was indeed rollback of the previous recognition on Jerusalem, which really begs the question: did the Foreign Minister lie in the first place?
I mean, the Foreign Ministry initially deleted some sentences from its website, as we heard. And this took Jerusalem quite by surprise. I mean, was there any indication that this was going to happen?
No, I don't believe so. I think it took not only Israel by surprise, but also the Jewish community in Australia by surprise as well. And I think furthermore, rubbing salt into the wound is the fact that the decision or the announcement was made on Simchat Torah, which is obviously an important Jewish holiday where many Jews are offline and weren't able to respond either. So I think that was rubbing salt into the wound especially.
And how has, the Australian Jewish community responded to this decision?
I think there's been a lot of shock, a lot of dismay, anger, questions being asked, why weren't we consulted? I think a lot of these questions are being asked by the Israelis as well. There's a term in Australia, this very quintessential Australian term, mateship. It describes friendship. It's something even stronger. It's rooted in values of respect, loyalty, solidarity. And you really have to ask here, has this been a betrayal of this friendship by the Australian government, and is the matter of trust now being eroded between the two countries?
So that leads me to my next question. I mean, really, how badly has this damaged Israel's relations with Australia?
It remains to be seen. I mean, we saw Prime Minister Lapid issued a very strong rebuke earlier today, which is very unlike him specifically in this kind of situation. The Australian ambassador here in Israel was actually brought into the foreign ministry in Jerusalem for reprimand, again unprecedented for an ally. It really remains to be seen how much harm this has caused. We saw barely a month ago the Australian government, in another reversal of the previous government's policies, said that they would be doubling the funding to UNRWA. We're now seeing this decision reversal on Jerusalem, and coming up in another week or so, we're going to see votes on Israel at the UN General Assembly, and that'll be watched very closely whether Australia will also reverse those voting patterns.
You mentioned UNRWA, and I think we talked previously, you said that this happened on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, another Jewish holiday. So we have these sort of major announcements regarding reversal or change in sort of Australia's policy towards Israel, towards the Palestinians. Is this deliberate, do you think?
I don't know whether it's deliberate or just mismanagement. It's understandable and expected that allies will disagree from time to time. That's normal. But there's got to be some kind of element of, I think, trust. And when you go behind someone's back, I think that's really, that's really questionable and really disconcerting. In this case, I think flat out cowardly. And you're seeing a lot of dismay and anger, many in Israel, in the Jewish community, and I think you only have to look at the fact that the first ones really applauding this decision were Hamas and Islamic Jihad, who hailed it as a courageous step.
The level of trust. I mean, you mentioned that this decision now has really shocked not only Israel, but also Australia. Can we expect any other surprises from this government? I mean, you mentioned also that there's the UN vote coming up. Is there a fear that Australia may choose to vote against Israel in the United Nations?
I think it's certainly a well-founded concern, especially if the events of the last month are anything to judge by. We know that when the previous Morrison government came into power, one of the first things it did was really reverse a lot of the UN voting patterns. And the Prime Minister was really outspoken in terms of the discrimination, the obsession that Israel was facing in the international community, specifically at the UN. So Australia made it a point to stand with Israel, and often a lone voice with Israel in the United States, Canada, in terms of standing with Israel at the United Nations and voting against these relentlessly one-sided, biased resolutions, whereas previously the government may have abstained or voted against Israel. And we're going to have to wait and see now, because they'll be voting again at the General Assembly in the next 2 weeks, whether Australia will change its voting patterns, whether they'll turn into more abstentions or more votes against Israel.
All right, well, we will keep an eye on the latest developments. Arsen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And now Russia is warning Israel not to send advanced weapon systems to Ukraine or risk relations between Jerusalem and Moscow. The warning comes on the heels of U.S. pressure on its allies, including Israel, to provide sophisticated air defense systems to Kiev quickly. Some allies have already complied, but Israel has yet to respond. More in this report by Steve Leibowitz.
The United States is encouraging allies, including Israel, to quickly provide Ukraine with anti-aircraft equipment to protect strategic targets from Russian strikes. The message from Washington was given added urgency after Moscow pummeled Ukraine with missiles this month, damaging energy facilities nationwide and leaving scores dead. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met in Brussels with defense officials from 50 allied countries, coordinating military support for Kyiv. Austin reportedly has his eye on several Israeli systems capable of countering Russian strikes in Ukraine. Austin pledged that Washington and NATO will ensure that Ukraine is provided with what it needs.
NATO continues to make clear that We will not be dragged into Russia's war of choice, but we will stand by Ukraine as it fights to defend itself. And we will continue to strengthen NATO's collective defense.
To watch full episodes of ILTV's Israel Daily and tons of other content from Israel, visit our website at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app.